Okay, I'm gonna do a little combination here. This is part of the double secret probation project number 2. By the time he sees this, he'll have it in his hands and it'll all be done. Um, that's what I told his daddy. Of all kits for this kid to pick, he had to pick this one. It's a little bit of how-to on the kit itself. I've had several inquiries over the last couple weeks. Oh man, how do you get the body work so smooth? This, that, the other thing. Well, I'm going to poke away at that. Going to do a little bit of what to look out for with this particular AMT 66 Nova kit. I don't think there's anybody better, in my estimation, than Bill Stillwagon, or for that matter, Ted Chopper Lear. Those two, I mean, their custom work is just off the charts. I pale in comparison. Actually, what they do with model car bodies, it just scares the living out. I mean, they're so good at it. Now, the difference with me is I basically use super glue, or I use 5-minute epoxy. If I'm filling a hole, say on a 66 AC Cobra, all the bumperette holes, I'll take a little bit of Plastruct flat sheeting, put it behind, and I'll put a drop of super glue in it. I'll allow it to shrink, sand a little bit, and continue to do so. The reason that I prefer this method as compared to body work is because the putty and whatnot will shrink. Sometimes after a period of time, maybe a year or so, it will crack. It will sink, and that would break my heart. And this is the reason that I go with this, because the super glue and or the 5-minute epoxy won't. It will not shrink. It is what it is. Another thing too, and I'll show you how I'm doing this in the various stages. When you sand this, you want to sand it when it's a little tacky still, because then what happens is the plastic that you're sanding off actually becomes part of the glue, which actually becomes part of the process, and this helps it all hold together. It fills it in quite nicely. So without further ado, let's start with what you're up against with this body. The originals that I have did not have this piece here, and the only thing that I found that you can do to do it clean is take a pair of the cutters for the come on Don, photo etch, and just reach in and snip. You have to be careful with it because it will chunk on you, and you might have to add a little bit, but it disappeared there. This body's been around forever. This is off the original DVD. This all has to go bye-byes. There's a mold line there. There's a mold line up here. There's a nasty one there. And once again, you got a mold line here. Now this panel here is for the chrome inset. If you want to take that away, then what you're going to have to do, and you've got a mold line here, you've got a mold line here, and you're going to have to sand this all smooth unless you're using that chrome insert piece. And basically what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to go over this entire body. Not that you don't do that, but again, as I shown on another segment, these panels are not smooth. So you're going to have to take 320 and bring these to where you don't have any waves in it. You're going to take this off. There is no doubt about it. The script is super light. You're going to want to remove that. You're going to want to go see Keith Marks decals. He sells some very nice sets for quite a few of the muscle cars. I highly recommend them. He sends plenty in case you screw up. He has, like, his paper has a metallic look to it, so that when you put them on, they look like the real deal. I wouldn't say 3D because naturally they don't have the thickness, but you can go with 2D, and their appearance is second to none. Also, you're going to have here, and eventually when we get around to doing Secret Probation Project number 2, I'm going to show you how to do this. You're going to find this on a lot of these kits. The chrome on both sides is not pronounced enough. There's a way of getting around it, and you can make it look good. But whenever you tackle this kit, be prepared, because there's quite a bit of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hacking on it. It's just one of those particular kits where you're going to have to put a decent amount of work into it. That is the body work that has to be done. Now, the difference between the two, you can definitely see. Like I said, it's like everything else. You're working with an older kit. They've re-released this, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 times. The latest release, people were screaming, justifiably so. A ton of flash on it. But that's modeling, and if you want a nice 66 Nova kit, well, you're going to have to work for it with this one. Okay, let's go over to the bodywork. Now, what I've done here, I glued the scoop together. Big whoop, right? Now, you can always put a little extra in here to and allow it to squeeze out, and then just wipe it with a finger, get it to smooth. But the best thing to do, and to make sure once it's glued together, is simply just take an applicator and just run a thin line. And Dalton announces his presence. Like I said, you don't have to be real neat about this. I mean, you want to get it along that line and then into the gap. And you're far better off using thin layers if you are using putty. I will use the spot putty on occasion too. I was regressing not mentioning that beforehand. But what you're doing here, it's going in and it's acting literally as a filler. Now this is a medium gap filling super glue. And as I started to say, you're better off if you have to go back. You stay thin. It's just like when you put your paint on. You stay thin, and if you have to go back and do it in a couple different places a little bit, so what? It's better than having everything mishappen and then trying to shape it. So basically, it's glued together. You got your super glue on it. Set it off to the side and let it dry. Now this one I started on, and what I do is I shape with my sandpaper first. That Satan's Child over there, that 1/8 scale, I had to reshape every body panel with it. And you'll hear me talk about this, time and time again. You want, when you sand, you don't want to go flat. You want to round it. You want to go with the shape of it, and that way, after, when it's painted, when you got your paint on it, you don't have any flat spots in it. So all I'm doing here is just going with the contours. And you don't have to grind into it. Like I said, all you want to do is shape this. Now this hood scoop is actually a nice hood scoop. You can use this on the Willys. It's low profile. You can use it on just about anything, which I have. This particular kit for back cabin for Pro Street, which is something else, you know, we're going to do somewhere down the line. I haven't done a Pro Street car in more than a few years. I've been hung up on the gassers and on the drag cars as usual. And the phone is blowing up again. Alright, so you can see the difference. Okay, the gap is gone pretty much. I got a little bit right here, a little bit over here. But now I'm going to run a little bit more into here. Like I said, you don't have to slop it on, because when you do that, then you're going to take a chance on when you do try to shape it, it's not going to be exactly the way that you want it to be. And that's trying to glue itself to my finger. So we'll flip over here to the other side. Now I'm using 320. You can actually step down to 220. You just have to make sure, as I always say, you know, if you're going to walk away from a project, whatever paper that you're using, make sure you leave a chunk there or leave yourself a little note. Because the last thing you want to do is start with 320, forget about it after you walk away from it where you were at, jump to 600, and you're going to have scratches in your body work or in your paint work underneath of it. Better safe than sorry. It takes 2 seconds. Now, as you can see, all I'm doing is I'm just rolling it up and staying with the contour. And this goes for any type of body work that you're doing. And that includes if you're just prepping a body. That's why I always insist on using the small pieces, because this way you have control over it. Jake, you're awful quiet this day.
Mm-hmm.
Acting completely out of character. Talk to me, Jake. Modeling's lonely.
That's half the reason you did it.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And don't be afraid to burn through the sandpaper. Not too bad, Jake. Now once you get this sanded to where you want it, you want to put some spot putty on it, that's fine. This particular piece is going to have to go into aluminum metallizer because this is going to be put into Canaan Silver, which is a custom mix that we do here, named after an up-and-coming young modeler whose last name is Gentry. Keep an eye on him. The kid's good. He's going to get a lot better. There aren't too many young kids involved in this, which is a shame, but there's a hell of a lot of guys my age or older and a little bit younger coming back into the hobby, so I think the hobby's going to be fine for a while. A lot of guys panic and say, oh my god. No, we're good. Tell you what, it was a cultural shock when I first come back into it because I was away from it for almost 30 years. And when I come back, I was just like, oh wow, the aftermarket stuff was mind-boggling. And even now, since I've been back in what, 16 years? The what's available now is ridiculous. You got companies like Slicks Decals, and you've got Detail Master and Model Car Garage, and you got Fireball, Model Works, and it's pretty cool. And then you've got the resin guys like Morgan Auto Design, and you got Ron Andrews and Steve Zimmerman's Wheels, and the list just goes on and on and on. Now that looks a lot better than that. And like I said, this is just a patience thing. That's all there is to it. Now, I still got a thin line here, but that's okay. It's going to take more sanding. But, like I said, you know, this is just one of them. You got it?
Hmm?
Okay. One of them there teens. Like I said, it's far better to do it this way, and if you have to go back in and retouch a little bit, you know, maybe put another thin line there just to make sure that you got it. Also, another thing you can do, you can shoot this. Now, I can't do it with this particular one because I'm going over it with the metallizer. But you can always shoot a thin layer of primer on it just to see where you're at, see if that line actually exists or whether it's just a ghost. But I don't even know what I did with the hood. I have no clue. Is that it? Not too bad. Too bad at all. But eventually that line will disappear. This will be just, well, that's just about where I want it to be. But it's something simple. It's an easy way to go about it. And like I said, just use the medium gap super glue on it, and it fills it. And it doesn't take that long for it to dry. I know for a fact this does not shrink. I've got cars that I did 12, 14, 15 years ago, and you cannot tell where I did the body work on it. Like I said though, I'm a mere babe in the woods compared to the likes of Master Stillwagon or Master Lear, and there's a handful of other ones that really do a number on the body work. So I hope this helped out a little bit. We'll be visiting this, you know, here and there again. There's some things, actually might as well do it now. when you take this and you got to put this body on without adjusting the rear end, you have to cut the rear axle right to the edge of the shackles to get your tires in. Otherwise, your tire is going to be here and it's going to be bulging and you're going to get this, or you're not going to be able to get it to fit down properly. Okay, so when you have your axle, you're going to have to cut it right at the edge of the outside of the leaf spring. Otherwise, you're not going to get your big tires in. Also, another thing, this kit, the 67 Merc and the 66 Fairlane, also the AMT flip nose Willys. You have to move the front suspension forward just a tiny bit, because otherwise you get this instead of this. Your front tires do not sit properly in the wheel well. The front suspension, you have to take the little mounting tits, you have to cut them, and everything has to slide just a tiny bit forward, because in this car especially, this model especially, you've got this when you put it in. And a lot of guys get frustrated, and I can't blame them, because you cut the tits off and you slide it forward, then you get this like you're supposed to. There's a lot of guys that will build, say, the 55 Chevy shoebox. I think it was Scott Carpenter's when it first came out. They will put a body on it, and it's great. You got to make sure, and it's not that difficult. Somewhere down the road, we'll do one. But again, you don't want this, or you don't want this. Your tires, your wheels, they have to sit dead center in your wheel wells. It just doesn't look right. And I see a lot of guys doing this, and they continue to do it. They'll take that Carpenter frame, the setup, the wheels, the tires. It's simple to make that adjustment, to get that to extend to where you got it here, but you'll actually have them with it sitting this way. Like I said, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, but it don't look too pretty. And if you're building for show, the judges ain't gonna be too thrilled about it either. So, just a little how-to here. There'll be some other stuff in a little bit that we'll we'll tackle a little bit more. Show you samples, examples of where we've actually done a little bit of this or that, and continue to work with the body work here and there, filling in, doing whatever. But just a short segment. So this is your old man, and I'll catch you on the fly. God bless. We're out.